The planet was a silent witness to the passage of time. Once teeming with life, it now lay forgotten, hidden in the far reaches of the galaxy. Its surface was a mixture of ancient ruins and vast deserts, long untouched by any living being. The stars above it seemed distant, uninterested in the history that had unfolded below. But today, something was different. Today, deep beneath the planet's surface, an ancient structure, long dormant, began to stir. There was no warning, no sign of activity, just a faint hum that resonated through the rock, barely perceptible at first. If one were close enough to hear, they might have mistaken it for the whisper of the wind or the crack of a dying star. But for those who truly understood, this sound was a harbinger of something far more dangerous. A small group of alien explorers, the Xorxians, had recently arrived on this forgotten planet, hoping to discover something valuable. They had heard rumors about the place, ancient texts that spoke of a human relic, one that had the potential to change the course of the galaxy forever. However, the Xorxians weren't prepared for what they were about to find. The leader of the expedition, Commander Torek, stood over the ruins of an old human city, his alien eyes scanning the horizon. "It's hard to believe that humans once lived here," he muttered. His voice, though calm, betrayed a hint of discomfort. The Xorxians had never fully understood humanity. They had heard of their brutal history, their rise and fall, their wars, and their eventual disappearance from the galaxy. Yet there was something unnerving about this place, something ancient that didn't quite fit the narrative. Torek motioned for his team to begin the excavation. They had already uncovered several old buildings, now little more than piles of stone and metal. But one structure had caught their attention, a towering structure buried deep beneath the surface. It was unlike anything the Xorxians had ever seen. Its architecture was both primitive and advanced, as if the humans had blended their ancient designs with technology they had yet to understand. With the help of their high-tech equipment, they began to dig. As the ground shifted and cracked open, a deep, low hum began to grow louder. It seemed to vibrate through the air, as if the planet itself was waking up. The Xorxians had no idea what they were unleashing. Torek stepped closer to the structure, his hand reaching out toward the old metal door. It was covered in strange symbols that none of them could read. His fingers hesitated just before touching the surface. There was a feeling, a kind of warning in the air, but curiosity was stronger. He pressed his palm against the door, and the hum suddenly escalated into a powerful vibration. Without warning, the door slid open with a grinding sound, revealing the artifact hidden within. A massive chamber stretched before them, and in the center stood a huge, glowing object. It pulsed with an eerie, almost alive energy, radiating a force the Xorxians had never felt before. Torek's heart skipped a beat. "What is this?" one of the other explorers whispered, his voice tinged with awe. Torek didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the artifact, and a deep, unsettling feeling began to rise within him. It wasn't just the glow or the strange symbols that sent shivers down his spine. It was the power that emanated from it. This wasn't just any ancient relic. This was something far more dangerous. Before Torek could command his team to retreat, a soft, mechanical click echoed through the chamber. The artifact's glow intensified, and the temperature in the room began to rise. The walls around them trembled. Then the hum returned, louder and more urgent this time. Suddenly, the artifact erupted with light, blinding everyone in the room. The Xorxians instinctively shielded their eyes, but the light was too powerful. As it subsided, they looked around in shock. The artifact had activated, awakening something that had remained dormant for centuries. Torek's heart raced. He could feel the shift in the atmosphere, like a storm about to break. "Commander," one of his team members called out in a panic. "Something's happening outside." Torek turned toward the entrance of the chamber, and his breath caught in his throat. Across the barren horizon, a massive shadow loomed. It wasn't just a ship, it was an entire fleet of warships, emerging from the depths of the planet's atmosphere. The ships were enormous, their sleek, dark forms reflecting the light of the distant stars. They were human warships, unlike anything the Exorcians had ever seen. Their design was sophisticated, elegant, and terrifying. The humans had built something that could rival the power of the Exorcian Empire itself. Torek felt a chill run down his spine. His worst fears were realized. The humans had not only survived, but they had been waiting for someone to unlock the key to their power. "Prepare the fleet," Torek ordered, his voice sharp and urgent. "We need to leave. Now." The team scrambled to retreat, but the ground beneath them shook again, and the ships above began to move. It was clear that the humans had already taken notice. A low, almost musical hum reverberated through the air as the human warships activated their weapons. The Exorcians knew they were no longer the most advanced species in the galaxy. In that moment, they realized the truth. Humanity had never truly been gone. They had merely been waiting, hidden in the shadows, biding their time. As the Exorcian fleet scrambled to prepare for battle, Torek's mind raced. What had the humans built in the depths of the planet? And what would they do with their newfound power? The artifact wasn't just a weapon. It was a message, one that the Exorcians couldn't ignore. The humans were back, and the galaxy was about to change forever. As the Exorcian fleet assembled, a wave of unease spread throughout their ranks. The commander, Torek, stood before his crew, his mind racing. They had underestimated the power of the humans. The fleet of warships that now hovered above the forgotten planet was no longer a legend, nor a mere ghost of a past civilization. They were real, alive, and ready to defend whatever secret lay hidden on the barren world. The Exorcians had always prided themselves on being the dominant force in the galaxy, and yet this sudden reappearance of humanity shook them to their core. The humans had been gone for so long, their civilizations reduced to myth and rumor. The Exorcians had thought they had wiped them out, but now the truth was staring them in the face. The human fleet was not only vast, but also advanced beyond anything the Exorcians had ever encountered. Torek turned to his second-in-command, Zern. "Prepare the fleet," he said, his voice betraying a hint of anxiety. "We cannot allow the humans to establish themselves here. We must act quickly before they have a chance to fully awaken." He knew that if the Exorcians didn't strike first, they might lose the element of surprise. The human ships were already in motion, positioning themselves in perfect formation above the planet. Torek's eyes narrowed as he studied their tactics. The humans weren't just powerful. They were strategic. Every movement of their warships felt deliberate, as if they knew exactly how to outmaneuver any opponent. The Exorcian fleet moved into position, their warships, designed for speed and destruction, spreading out to form a defensive perimeter around the planet. The long-range weapons powered up, ready to fire. Torek couldn't help but feel a deep sense of dread creeping over him. The Exorcian Empire had never faced an enemy like this. The humans were not just fighting to survive. They were fighting for revenge, for something much deeper than mere conquest. Torek glanced back at the planet, where the ancient artifact continued to glow, its pulse now synchronized with the movements of the human fleet. The Exorcians had thought the artifact was nothing more than a relic, a piece of ancient history that held little value. But now, in the face of these human ships, it was clear that the artifact was the key to a power that bent the laws of the galaxy itself. "Open fire," Torek ordered, his voice cold, though he knew deep down that it wouldn't be enough. The first wave of Exorcian missiles shot across the dark sky, striking the nearest human ship. The explosion illuminated the vast emptiness of space, sending shockwaves through the atmosphere. But to Torek's horror, the human ship barely flinched. The blast had little effect. It was as if the ship had absorbed the attack, its shields rippling with energy before reforming. Torek's heart skipped a beat. The humans had technology that was far beyond anything the Exorcians had in their arsenal. This was no ordinary fleet. One of the Exorcian warships launched a series of high-powered plasma beams, but again, the human ship countered with devastating accuracy. The beams bounced off the human shields like stones off the surface of water, leaving the Exorcians stunned and disoriented. Torek clenched his fists. This was not how the battle was supposed to go. The humans were fighting back with more ferocity than anyone had expected. The Exorcian warships continued to fire, but each attack seemed to be absorbed or deflected. The humans weren't just surviving. They were learning. Each time a missile or blast hit, they adapted, adjusting their shields, repositioning their warships, and countering with weapons that defied the laws of physics. "Increase firepower," Torek shouted, but his voice was tinged with uncertainty. "All ships, engage at full capacity." His command was met with immediate action, but it was clear that the Exorcians were losing the advantage. The humans weren't afraid of them. They weren't even fighting in the way that Torek had expected. There was no chaotic barrage of random fire, no desperate attempts to overwhelm the enemy with sheer numbers. The human ships fought with a calm, methodical precision. They knew exactly what they were doing. As the battle raged on, Torek couldn't shake the growing feeling that the humans were not just defending. They were toying with them. It was as if they had all the time in the galaxy, watching their enemies waste their energy. For every Exorcian ship that fell, the humans seemed to lose nothing. They didn't even need to fire the massive weapons they possessed. Instead, they disarmed their enemies with specialized energy pulses that fried the Exorcian electronics without causing any direct damage to the ships themselves. It was a surgical strike, cutting through the Exorcians' defenses and leaving them vulnerable. Torek watched as one of his own flagships was disabled in a matter of seconds. The human warship, a massive behemoth, launched a pulse wave that swept through the Exorcian fleet, incapacitating several ships in an instant. The light from the blast seemed to tear through space itself, distorting the very fabric of reality. Torek realized with horror that the humans had developed energy weapons that were more efficient and precise than anything the Exorcians had. "Retreat," Torek finally barked, his voice thick with frustration and fear. But even as he gave the order, he knew it was too late. The Exorcians were being crushed. Their once proud fleet was now in full retreat, scattered by the sheer power of the human warships. The humans weren't just a threat to be defeated. They were an unstoppable force, something beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. The Exorcians had made one grave mistake. They had forgotten the humans. Now, as the Exorcians turned tail and fled, Torek realized the galaxy would never be the same. The humans had returned, and they were not just survivors of an ancient war. They were a force of nature, and the Exorcians would have to learn to live in their shadow. The future of the galaxy was no longer in their hands. It was in the hands of the humans, and their warships were just the beginning. The Exorcian fleet had never experienced a retreat quite like this. Ships, once so proud and untouchable, scattered like leaves in the wind, overwhelmed by the unexpected fury of the human warships. Torek's mind raced as he watched the chaos unfold. Their carefully executed strategies were useless against this new force, this human might that defied everything they had known about warfare. He could hear the radio channels crackling with distress calls and reports of ships falling, but the humans had already anticipated it all. "Regroup," Torek commanded, though he knew the order was futile. It wasn't just the Exorcians who were retreating. It was their pride, their sense of invincibility, slipping through their fingers. The humans had turned the tide of battle with ease, and they weren't stopping. Their fleet, which had been dormant for 500,000 years, was now fully awake and firing on all cylinders. One by one, the Exorcian warships began to go silent. Torek's gaze fixed on the vastness of space, trying to locate any sign of their fleet regrouping. But it was all too clear. The humans were everywhere. Their warships, massive and terrifying, now surrounded the Exorcians from every angle. It wasn't just a battle anymore. It was a chase, a hunt. The humans were tracking them, studying their weaknesses, and slowly picking them off one by one. On the Exorcian flagship, panic set in. A communications officer turned to Torek. her eyes wide with fear. "Commander, they've adapted. They're using our own tactics against us. Their fleet is closing in. There's nowhere to run." Torik's jaw clenched. He could feel it. The humans weren't merely defending themselves or protecting their world. This wasn't a desperate fight for survival. They were hunting them down. There was something deeply unsettling about the way the humans fought. Calm, calculated, like they had all the time in the universe. They seemed to know the Xorxian fleet's movements before it even happened. It was as if they were reading their thoughts, anticipating their every move, and then countering it with terrifying precision. "Commander, their flagship is targeting us," the officer shouted. Torik whipped his head around to see the human flagship, a colossal vessel, more advanced than anything the Xorxians had ever encountered, lock its weapons onto the Xorxian flagship. The hum of its energy weapons was deafening, and then, in the blink of an eye, the flagship's defensive shields began to flicker. It wasn't just a direct hit. The human ship's weapons seemed to bypass the shields altogether, targeting their vulnerable systems instead. It was as if the humans had figured out exactly where to strike, knowing the Xorxians' weaknesses better than their own commanders. "Shields at 30%. One of the officers screamed as the ship shuddered from another blast. Torik's thoughts raced. How could the humans know this much about them? How could they anticipate their every move? The humans were supposed to be a broken race, wiped out long ago. But now, they were everywhere, their ships relentless, their tactics ruthless. "Activate the last resort weapon," Torik shouted, hoping for a miracle. But even as he issued the order, he knew it was a lost cause. The Xorxians had underestimated the humans for far too long. As the Xorxian flagship continued to struggle, a voice cut through the silence, a voice from the human fleet. "You cannot hide from us. You never could." The message echoed across the fleet, a chilling declaration. It was clear now. The humans were not only back, they were more than capable of challenging the entire galaxy. Torik's heart raced. What were the humans after? Were they here to conquer, or were they simply here to reclaim what was once theirs? He couldn't understand the motivations of a race that had been gone for 500,000 years, but he knew one thing for certain: there was no stopping them. The Xorxian flagship was finally hit with a direct strike to its core systems, and with a final, resounding explosion, it disintegrated into nothing more than scattered debris in the vast emptiness of space. The human warships moved forward, undeterred by the destruction they had caused. Their focus was now on the remaining ships, the fleeing remnants of a once proud fleet. "What now, Commander?" one of Torik's officers asked, her voice shaking. Torik didn't respond immediately. He stood there, staring out at the destruction. For the first time in his life, he felt the weight of his species' arrogance, the pride that had blinded them to the reality before them. The humans were no longer the prey. They had become the hunters. The galaxy had just witnessed the rebirth of a power that the Xorxians couldn't hope to comprehend. As the remaining Xorxian ships scattered, a final message flashed across the screens of the fleet. It was from the humans, the words sharp and clear. "We've waited a long time for this moment. The galaxy is ours once again. This is just the beginning." The Xorxians had been defeated, but the war was far from over. The humans had returned, and they were not to be underestimated. For Torik and the Xorxians, the reality was simple. The humans were back, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The aftermath of the battle left the Xorxians in a state of shock. Their once proud fleet was scattered across the vast expanse of space, broken and defeated. The hum of the human warships still echoed in their ears, a constant reminder that the humans had returned. And they were stronger than ever. Torik, now aboard one of the few surviving Xorxian ships, stood silently in the command center, staring out into the black void of space. His hands were clenched tightly around the console, his mind racing. The humans had been dormant for 500,000 years, and in the blink of an eye, they had wiped out nearly everything the Xorxians had built. "Commander," one of his officers spoke, breaking the silence, We've lost nearly 80% of our fleet. Our remaining ships are in no condition to continue the fight. The humans are relentless. They're following us. They know our every move." Torik's jaw tightened as he looked over the reports. The Xorxian warships, designed for speed and overwhelming force, were being systematically hunted down by the human ships. They were everywhere, appearing like shadows, surrounding the remaining Xorxian vessels with chilling precision. The humans had not only won, they had dominated. "We can't keep running," Torik muttered, his voice filled with bitterness. He couldn't allow his people to be destroyed, but the thought of facing the humans again, those who had been gone for centuries, only to return stronger than they could have ever imagined, seemed impossible. The Xorxians had no hope of winning. The humans had the technology, the power, and the strategy to outmaneuver them at every turn. A voice suddenly cut through the tension. "Commander, we intercepted a transmission from the humans." Torik's eyes narrowed. The humans were sending a message. What could they possibly want now? He gestured for the officer to play the transmission. The screen flickered to life, and the image of a human admiral appeared. His face was calm, almost peaceful, but there was an underlying sense of power in his demeanor. "Xorxians," the admiral's voice echoed through the command center. "We know you are still out there, hiding in the corners of space. But understand this. This is your final warning. Leave the human territories, disband your fleet, and never return. The humans are no longer a lost species. We are back, and we will not tolerate any threats to our existence. If you choose to ignore this message, know that you will face the full force of our warships. We will hunt you down." The transmission ended, leaving a chilling silence behind. Torik stood motionless, his gaze fixed on the screen, his mind struggling to comprehend what he had just heard. The humans weren't just threatening them. They were declaring war. A war that the Xorxians were now incapable of winning. The message was clear. They were not just defending their territory. They were asserting their dominance. They were coming for the galaxy. "Commander," Zern, his second-in-command, said cautiously, "what should we do? We can't take on the humans. We are outmatched." Torik's gaze remained fixed on the stars outside the ship. He had always believed the Xorxians to be the apex predators of the galaxy. But now, facing the cold, unwavering certainty of the human warships, he could feel the weight of his species' arrogance crumbling. The humans were not just another race to be conquered or defeated. They were something different, something that had been hidden away, waiting for the right moment to strike back. "We can't outrun them forever." Torik finally spoke, his voice heavy with defeat. "We need to rethink everything. The humans are not like us. They are adaptable, powerful, and they will never stop until they have reclaimed what they believe is theirs." Zern nodded grimly. "What do we do now?" "We have no choice," Torik said, his voice darkening. "We have to negotiate. Perhaps there is a way we can survive this. If we offer them something valuable, they might spare us." Torik turned to his communications officer. "Send a message to the human fleet. Tell them we are willing to negotiate terms. We want to avoid further bloodshed." The officer hesitated but then nodded, preparing the transmission. Torik's mind raced. Negotiate. It was their only hope. The humans had made their intentions clear, and the Xorxians couldn't afford to be wiped out. But what could they possibly offer to a species so advanced, so powerful? The humans were more than just a threat. They were a force that would reshape everything the Xorxians had known. And with every passing moment, Torik realized that the galaxy was no longer theirs to command. It had been taken from them. The humans were in charge now. The communications officer finished preparing the message and sent it off into the void of space, the silent, empty space between the two fleets. They would wait. They would wait for a response. But as Torik sat in his chair staring out at the stars, he knew that whatever happened next, the humans had already won. The Xorxians sat in silence, the air thick with tension, as they waited for the response from the human fleet. The massive battle cruiser Torek commanded drifted slowly through space, surrounded by the remaining, scattered remnants of the Torxian fleet. Their once mighty forces were now reduced to a handful of crippled ships, drifting like ghostly echoes of a forgotten empire. Torek, however, could feel something much heavier pressing on him than just the defeat. It was the weight of his people's future. Their very existence was on the line. And yet, as he stared out into the black void, one thought persisted in his mind. The humans had already won. Hours passed, though it felt like days. The silence of space was suffocating. The crew members on board the ship were anxious, every one of them knowing that the next transmission they received could either seal their fate or give them a slim chance of survival. Torek stood in the command center, pacing back and forth, his mind working on overdrive. He had tried everything to secure a peace, a way to survive, but nothing had worked. The humans had made it clear. They were relentless. They had no intentions of negotiating on equal terms. He finally turned to Zern, his second in command, and spoke in a low, almost detached voice. "Do you think they'll reply? Do you think they'll spare us?" His eyes were filled with uncertainty, a sharp contrast to the confident, aggressive leader he had been when this war began. Zern said nothing at first. The silence hung between them like a curtain, and for a long moment, neither spoke. Then, Zern, his voice steady but full of sorrow, replied, "Commander, the humans are not like us. They do not negotiate from weakness. Their message was clear. They want control of the galaxy. All we can hope for now is mercy." Just then, the communications officer's voice broke through the quiet hum of the room. "Commander, we've received a response from the human fleet." Torek's heart skipped a beat. He immediately stepped forward, his hands clenched tightly behind his back. The entire room fell still as the transmission began to play. The image that appeared on the screen was not the face of a commander, but the face of an unknown figure, tall, stern, and alien, with eyes cold as the void. It was not the voice of someone who wished for peace. This was someone who spoke with authority. "Sorxians," the figure's voice boomed, low and commanding. "You have requested to negotiate, but understand this. The time for negotiations has passed. You have had millennia to prepare, to rule, and you have failed. The humans no longer hide in the shadows. We are no longer a lost species. We are the new masters of this galaxy, and we will tolerate no resistance." Torek felt the blood drain from his face. There was no offer of peace, no willingness to meet halfway. The humans had made their terms clear. They were here to take over, to remake the galaxy in their image. The figure continued without pause, its voice unwavering. "Consider this a final warning. You are either with us, or you are against us. If you choose the latter, know that we will erase every last one of you from existence. This is not a threat, Sorxian. This is a guarantee. Our warships are already positioned to wipe you out completely. You have one chance to surrender. Choose wisely." The screen went black, the silence of space pressing in around them again. Torek stood motionless for several seconds, his mind struggling to process what had just transpired. The humans had not only refused to negotiate, but they had also openly declared their domination. They were no longer seeking survival or coexistence. They were intent on conquering everything. The Sorxian Empire, with all its power, was now nothing but an afterthought, a failure in the face of the humans' unstoppable rise. Zern was the first to speak, his voice quiet but filled with hopelessness. "Commander, what do we do now?" Torek turned away from the screen, his expression hardening into one of resolve. He knew what he had to do, but he also knew it would likely be the last thing he would ever do as a leader of the Sorxians. "We fight," he said, his voice low, barely a whisper. But there was no hesitation, no doubt in his mind. The Sorxians had always fought for survival, always believed in their strength, their ability to overcome any foe. If this was to be the end, then at least they would go down fighting. The humans may have returned as conquerors, but the Exorcians were not going to be exterminated without a struggle. "We fight," Torek repeated, looking out into the black abyss of space. "Even if it's our last stand, we fight." The crew remained silent as they prepared for the inevitable. The human fleet had already shown what it was capable of, and there was no mistaking the severity of their intent. The Exorcians, outmatched and outgunned, had no hope of winning. But there was still one thing they could do: resist. Fight. The human warships were indeed powerful, and their technology was beyond anything the Exorcians had ever seen. But the Exorcians had one thing the humans couldn't account for: their will to fight, to survive, even when there was no hope of victory. The final battle was on the horizon, and though the Exorcians were defeated, they would not go quietly into the night. This was their final chance. This was the last moment of defiance. And as Torek looked at his crew, his people, he knew that the fight ahead would determine not just their fate, but the fate of every other race in the galaxy. Would the Exorcians be swept away by the tide of humanity's wrath? Or would they leave a legacy of resistance, of defiance, in the face of total domination? Whatever happened, the Exorcians were going to make the humans regret underestimating them. The humans were powerful, yes, but there was one thing they had never experienced before: true defiance. The final stand had arrived. The Exorcian fleet, though battered and broken, had made its preparations for the last battle of their existence. Torek stood at the front of the command deck of their flagship, his hands tightly gripping the console, his mind locked in a singular thought: survival. The human warships were already closing in, their massive silhouettes visible across the sensors, blocking out the stars like a dark, oppressive wall. The Exorcians, despite all their technology, were hopelessly outmatched. The humans' power was overwhelming. They had seen it firsthand: human warships that could tear through shields as though they were paper, weapons that struck faster than the mind could process. The Exorcians had been humbled, shattered, and now there was nothing left but this, the final conflict. "Commander," Zern's voice broke through the heavy silence. "The human fleet is locking on. They're readying their weapons." Torek's heart pounded in his chest. He could feel the pressure, the weight of his responsibility. The Exorcians had once ruled, had once been feared throughout the galaxy. But now, they were cornered. The end was near. He turned to face Zern, his expression grim. "Order the fleet to engage," Torek said, his voice cold, resolute. "We die on our feet, not our knees." Zern hesitated for a moment, but then nodded. It was the only order left. The Exorcians would either fight and die with honor or surrender to a fate worse than death. There was no middle ground. "All ships, prepare for engagement," Zern transmitted to the fleet. "This is it. Fight as though there is no tomorrow." The Exorcian ships moved into position, their weapons primed. The energy coursing through the ships was palpable, the air thick with the tension of what was to come. But no matter how much they prepared, the cold truth remained: the humans were more powerful, faster, and smarter. The Exorcians were out of time. Their shields were failing. Their weapons were almost depleted. They were about to face the full force of a species that had waited 500,000 years to reclaim what they had lost. The first shot came without warning, a brilliant beam of energy from the human flagship that sliced through the void with terrifying speed. The beam struck the nearest Exorcian ship, and in an instant, the vessel erupted into a cloud of debris. No warning, no mercy, just the brutal, efficient destruction of everything the Exorcians had built. It was a message, swift, unrelenting, and without remorse. The humans weren't just here to conquer. They were here to eradicate. "Return fire," Torek barked, his voice echoing through the command center. But his words were drowned out by the deafening sound of the human warships firing back, their beams of destruction cutting through the darkness like scythes. Another ship fell, then another. Torek's heart sank as he watched the once proud fleet crumble. Each Exorcian ship that was destroyed felt like a loss of his people's very soul. But even as the battle raged around them, Torek knew that there was nothing they could do to change the outcome. The humans had shown their hand. They were unbeatable. "Commander, our shields are failing," cried the communications officer. "We're being overwhelmed. The human ships are surrounding us." Torek stood still, staring out at the stars, the weight of his people's fate pressing on him. There was no escape, no salvation. The humans had hunted them down, and now the Exorcians were nothing but prey. With a heavy heart, Torek made the decision that would seal their fate. "Activate the self-destruct sequence," he ordered, his voice low but steady. "We will not let them take us alive." The command was issued, and the countdown began. The Exorcian flagship's engines began to hum with energy as the self-destruct system was engaged. It was the only choice left. At least they could go out with a final blow, taking as many human warships as they could with them. As the countdown reached 0, Torek stood at the front of the command deck, staring out at the stars, his mind filled with a sense of finality. He had done everything he could for his people, and now, as the human fleet closed in, there was nothing left but to face their end. But then, as the countdown hit its final seconds, something unexpected happened. The humans stopped firing. For a split second, there was nothing but an eerie silence. The weapons from the human fleet stopped, as if time itself had frozen. Torek could barely believe it. Was this it? Were the humans going to let them die with some sense of dignity? Were they showing mercy? "Commander, they're signaling us," the communications officer said, her voice trembling. Torek turned sharply. "Put it through." A new figure appeared on the screen, another human officer, but this time her expression was calm, even empathetic. Her eyes locked onto Torek's. "You don't have to do this," she said, her voice surprisingly soft but firm. "You fought well, but this doesn't have to be the end for your people. We are not here to destroy you. We are here to rebuild." Torek stared at her, his mind racing. Was this a trick? Was this another ploy to lure him into a trap? "Why?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "Why would you spare us after everything we've done?" The woman's gaze softened. "Because we understand. We were once like you. A species with ambitions that blinded us to the consequences. But we've learned, and we want to help you. We can rebuild what was lost. Together. All we ask is that you surrender and join us. We are the future, but we don't have to be enemies." Torek stood there in stunned silence. This wasn't the final blow he had expected. This wasn't destruction. This was something different, a second chance. In that moment, Torek realized that the humans weren't just back for revenge or conquest. They were offering a chance to survive, a chance to start over. But it would come at a cost. They would no longer rule the galaxy as they once did. The Exorcians would have to accept that the humans were now the ones who held the power. "Commander, what do we do?" Zern asked, his voice filled with uncertainty. Torek looked out at the stars one last time. He had led his people to the edge of oblivion. And now, faced with the chance to join the humans and survive, he knew that the galaxy was about to change forever. For better or for worse, the Exorcians would live on. But it would no longer be as rulers. It would be as partners in a galaxy that was no longer theirs alone. With a heavy heart, Torek spoke the words that would define the future of the galaxy. "We surrender."